Hello, welcome to yesterday's Airlines. Strap yourself in because it is time for the June/July Gemini Jets announcements and my ranking of said announcements. I hadn't even noticed that Gemini didn't make any announcements in June, to be honest. I'm not sure what that says. But the last time they released was actually in May, or the last time they announced. And that set looked vaguely promising when I did the original ranking video and swiftly became less promising when the photos of the releases came out, as I discussed in that reaction video I made to them. Yeah, mainly because of the old mold usage for the 777 and 747. But yeah, this is Gemini. You've got to temper your expectations a little bit. This month round, we've got another set of really Gemini releases, and they can certainly hit their core market, and they continue to do so, and they're not really interested in anyone else, and that's fine. You know, it's their company and they can run it the way they like, and clearly America is number one for them, and airline contracts are number two. Or arguably airline contracts are number one and American market is number two. But either way, those are the two most important things, and the releases this month clearly illustrate that. That doesn't necessarily mean they're bad models by any stretch of the imagination, but as I said, temper your expectations a little bit. So anyway, let's get on and stop waffling. And before I do that, as always, chuck a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and follow me at Instagram at @YesToAirlines, and check out the Facebook portion of my social media profile as well. And don't forget yesterdaysairlines.com, where a lot of the detail work goes on. But let's get on and check out this month's 9 Gemini Jets announcements. Now, it's worth pointing out that there are only 9 models, and Gemini rarely produce more than 10 per month, and they just don't believe that the market can carry more models. And I know that JC Wings have really ramped up their releases in response to NG Models' larger sets, and I know that Gemini have been annoyed with them for doing so and almost told them to stop. And I've seen some social media messages they put out where they've said there's too many models. Don't really understand that personally. It's only too many if they're not selling, and clearly for JC they believe they are. But Gemini stick to their small sets of presumably higher production numbers, and seem content, at least in 400 scale, to keep on working that way. There's a decent spread of aircraft types this month, and it's not just a case of Airbus and Boeings, but I would say that a lot of the airlines here are very similar. We will start, as always, with the Airbuses, and neither of these Airbuses are really likely to get your blood pumping particularly fast. The first one up is a Lufthansa Cargo A321 P to F conversion, DA Echo Uniform Charlie. Now, this aircraft has got these tiny little Hello Europe titles on it. It's actually operated by Lufthansa CityLine, not a Lufthansa mainline, part of Lufthansa Cargo. But who cares anymore? I mean, Lufthansa's branding's all over the shop when it gets down to what name is actually in small text under the Lufthansa titles. It's all about keeping your costs down. Now, this aircraft isn't the first release, or it's not, sorry, the first release of this aircraft in 400 scale, and that's what makes this one slightly disappointing, or slightly not particularly exciting, because NG Models got here literally 2 years ago and released exactly the same model in July 2022. If you wanted a Lufthansa Cargo A321, I'd have thought you'd have likely picked up that one, which is obviously going to be better than this Gemini one by some distance, because no matter what they do, they can't really make a dramatic change in that A321 mold. It is okay, but it is certainly not great. And when you compare NG A321s next to the Gemini JC A321s, you can see the difference. So you've waited 2 years and you're getting a model which isn't as good as the one that was made 2 years before. So it's not really particularly interesting or likely to excite. And it's, you know, very much the definition of a workhorse model for me. Now, as everyone knows, Gemini are big on corporate contract, and Emirates is arguably the most important of those, and they have made a huge number of models for Emirates over the years, a lot of which get released as models in their standard release sets, but you feel that Emirates is really behind the release of them. I mean, for example, they've made over 50 A380s now, and today, or in this set, we have another one, and this one represents the Wimbledon tennis tournament for 2024. So we've got again, the new scheme with the official partner of the championships of Wimbledon logo on the back half of the aircraft. You know, it's who collects all of these outside of, in fact, who collects all of these? I don't believe anyone really does. Emirates special schemes always strike me as being a little bit boring, and this one isn't particularly exciting. It's not unattractive, but it isn't particularly attractive either. And obviously, the quality of the Gemini A380 is nowadays really suspect. So the reg on this one at A6, Echo, Oscar Echo, if you care. But clearly, the mould is very aged. It's massively inferior to the other active A380s on the market from Aviation 400 and Phoenix. And there's nothing really going for this model that would make me say it's anything other than workhorse. And to be honest, considering the mould nowadays, I would probably be being quite generous to put it in workhorse, but I will do so. That moves us into Boeing territory, and the first aircraft up is another old Gemini mould that probably should be stopped or retired. It's again not a bad mould, but it dates right from the beginning of the history of Gemini in the early 2000s. Been updated with new landing gear. It's always been a solid mould, but when you compare it to the competition, which again, in this case, is very much NG models, then it is a very ordinary mould. So we've got a FedEx 757-200 freighter. The reg is N921FD. It wouldn't surprise me if this again is a corporate version. They made N920FD in September 2019. They also made N901FD in January 09, so a lot longer ago, but the models are not far off being interchangeable. NG have made this one. They made it in May 2019, so quite a long time ago, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's a very hard version to find. So in that regard, gives the releases a little bit more validity. But at the same time, it is a model which has now been made 4 times. So, yeah, it workhorses itself, really, doesn't it? Now, Gemini got there first when it comes to 767-400s, but unfortunately, they did so by releasing what is a really poor mould for the type. Now, if you haven't seen my previous discussions of this mould, then check those out. Watch or read the review that has been done at yesterday's airlines.com. I reviewed the individual model and I compared it to the Dragon Wings version from eons ago, and it really didn't compare well. Since then, of course, there has been the release of an extraordinarily good Panda Model 767-400, and we've got the first NG Model 767-400s coming up soon. Now, the NG mould isn't faultless, but it is definitely better than this Gemini one. So you've got a huge amount of choice when it comes to 767-400s in the marketplace at the moment. 3 different moulds, all of them being used actively. And the reality is there aren't that many schemes, and anything that Gemini is going to make is going to be made by the competitors soon on better moulds. So even though I understand why Gemini are releasing the 767-400s, from a purchasing perspective, it simply doesn't make any sense to buy them, in my opinion. This month we've got a couple. We've got the Colours in Motion Wavy Gravy Delta 767-400 N829 Mike Hotel. There have been quite a few 764s for Delta, but to be honest, none of them have been in this scheme yet. And that is a big yet. Panda literally just announced 4 more Delta, or even 5 more 767-400s. So it's only a matter of time till they get to this, and probably not that long. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been released before this version, but yeah, I really struggle to recommend the mold. I'm going to put this one in workhorse. Now, the other one that's announced here is United Airlines. It's in the current Evo Blue scheme. It's N76064. This has also been actually released recently. I mean, it is the first release from NG models, so they're going directly up against the NG version, which is substantially better. But it has also been released by Panda already not long ago, and that mold is even better than the NG version. So once again, you know, this is definitely coming in third. I'll be charitable, I think, and I'll give it a workhorse, but I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I might give that some thought over the rest of the video and see how I feel. So that's 5 models in. We're over 50% of the way in, and all of the releases have been workhorses so far. They're on older molds. They're for airlines like Lufthansa, Emirates, FedEx, Delta. The Gemini releases constantly, and they've largely been released better by others already. So not particularly good. Have to say the back end of this release set is substantially better. And the first model up in that group is an ATR 42. It's in the colours of Cubana. The reg is CU Tango 1240. Now, I didn't even realise that Cubana had any ATR 42s, and it turns out they don't really, because apparently this one is leased from a company called Aero Gaviota, who I've never heard of. It's a Cuban Army airline. And it seems like, from what I'm seeing here, that Cubana are in real trouble. I didn't realise they had so few active aircraft. This is the only ATR 42 that they've got in service, and if I'm reading this list correctly, they've only got one other IL-96 and one Tu-204, and that's everything they've got at the moment. They did have ATR 72s and things, but it doesn't look like they've got any active at the moment. So Cubana's in real trouble. That's not surprising too much, I guess, considering the economic state of the country and the embargo and so on and so forth. Gemini, however, really does like Cubana, and obviously they released an AN26 recently, which was a really cool little model, though the scheme was too modern for me. This will be nice. Lovely little ATR in the current scheme. But, yeah, it is the only one they operate, and it just feels like a bit of a... I don't know, it just doesn't feel like a model that probably needed releasing. I guess there's probably quite a lot of Cuban collectors in the States, and that probably helps sales. I'm sure it'll be a nice model as long as the cockpit's in the right place, but it's not, you know, it's so exciting from where I'm standing, and there are lots of other ATRs that I would much prefer. I'll put this one into High Flyer. I think it's a good choice in an otherwise not particularly good set so far. We've got another prop jet this month, and that is a Dash 8 Q400. It's in the colours of Porter of Canada. The reg is CGKQC. It isn't the first time that Gemini have released a Porter Q400. They actually made one as long ago as 2010, though I believe that model is very rare. They also made another one in 2018, and that one is in a special scheme for the 150th anniversary of Canada. I think that this is a model which is well worth re-releasing. I'm sure it'll be popular. And the Gemini Dash 8 Q400 mold is a nice little mold as long as they get the undercarriage right. The pictures I've seen of the previous releases look good, and I'm sure this will be super popular with collectors, seeing as it is a current in-service Q400. Decent scheme from Porter, though, you know, as per usual with a lot of modern schemes, it's not exactly pushing the envelope. But nice release, plenty of demand. Yeah, I think this is a good one. I'll put this one, I think, up into Supersonic, actually. I think this one is definitely worthy. And that leaves 2 more models to discuss, and both of these are Mad Dogs. However, with the advent of the NG models MD80 molds, it isn't the case that the Gemini MD80s necessarily just gets put into Supersonic anymore, because they've got a lot of competition, and there are issues with this mold, especially at the nose. So what we've got, the first up here, is an MD88 N941DL. It's in the Colours in Motion Wavy Gravy scheme, so 2 of those this month. I think it'll be good, and there's never been one, I don't think, in this scheme to date. So that makes it well worth getting. The question, though, I have is, of course, will this be released by NG models soon? You'd have thought it must be high on their list. Now, ironically, it's not actually one that I need or particularly want. It's too new for me, so I'm not really interested in it. But I can see the appeal. But I don't think it's got enough appeal to be supersonic anymore. Not if there's likely to be a better NG version coming out. So I'm going to put this one into high fly. I think it's probably going to be a good model. It will be fine within the limitations of the Gemini MD-80, which are mainly to do with its front portion. Now, the last model for the month is not an MD-80, but it is a mad dog. It's an MD-90, and here there isn't any competition. NG don't have the mold, and the MD-90 mold is arguably a bit better than the MD-80 mold that Gemini have. The aircraft is Reno Air N905RA. That's a really good model to see, I think. I like Reno Air. Nice to have a dereg startup carrier from the 90s appearing. There's been only a smattering of Reno Air in the past from Dragon, and they were all MD-80s. Obviously, Reno was reasonably famous is a strong word, but it was well known for operating the MD-90s into places like Orange County, which had noise constraints. And Reno's got a cool little scheme as well with the mountains and everything. And this one's got this kind of ski Lake Tahoe special skiing bit going for it on the tower with a snowboarder. Yeah, I'm feeling this one, I have to say. I think this will be a superb model. Really the best model of the month by some distance in terms of the quality of the mold, interest of the airline, the fact that nobody else has made it. So this one is a definite supersonic in my book and really gets up there. And I'm very pleased to see this, and it will definitely be a model that I'm getting. So finishing off with a supersonic. Now, looking at the release set for this month, as you can see, there's quite a lot of workhorse. But in fact, I've been thinking about it. I'm going to move that United current Evo Blue 767-400 down into gas guzzler. I think that combination of the mold being really quite poor and it being released twice by other companies very recently on better molds, pushes it down a little bit. So I'm going to do that, but it doesn't fundamentally change what I'm seeing here. We've got a pretty ordinary month elevated by the 4 models that aren't Airbuses or Boeings, which are all much more interesting and on better molds. So there's some positives to be taken here. For starters, it's 2 announcement sets on a row that I'm going to be buying a model, because I'm picking up the Saab from the last set, and I'll pick up the MD-90 here as well. But at the same time, obviously, this is pretty ordinary fare from Gemini, and I just don't understand why anyone would be buying these 767-400s unless they just don't know that the other competing ones exist. Otherwise, yeah, man, you might have missed out on that Lufthansa cargo from NG. You might have missed out on previous FedEx 757s, or maybe you're looking at these and going, yeah, they'll be great. But realistically, they're really ordinary. However, the Cubana ATR, interesting. Porter, Dash 8, it's interesting. Probably a strong demand. And the MD-80s, the mold's not great, but the MD-90 is pretty good. So, yeah, okay. Far from spectacular. But Gemini keeps on ploughing its furrow. It seems to just do what it does, doesn't seem to care about the competition, except when it's trying to close it down. And it just does what it does. And obviously people like that. They continue to sell models, and it isn't really suffering. So, yeah, nothing wrong with that. If people like the models, people buy the models. Simple as that. For me, 4 good ones, and the rest just workhorsing it, really. But could be worse. Okay, well, that's it for this set of Gemini announcements. I'm getting through these now. So I've done the Aviation 400, I've done the Phoenix, I've done the Geminis. We just got the JC Wings, and I might do a Panda video, not sure. But until then, that's it from me. I'll see you later.